Why can't it be blown twice?
Yeah. Yeah.
Prophecy
Well,
never said it couldn't be
yeah,
blown more than once.
once I
Let's do it.
got to that line again this time, I literally laughed out loud. I'm like, "Oh, that's such Matt. That's such a Matt saying."
That's a mad thought. Everyone else being afraid of prophecy and going like, "Oh, we must stick to the prophecy." Rand be focused, dead set.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to keep to the letter of the prophecy,
Yeah.
and Matt finds he
Mhm.
finds the loophole through it. Going, wait, why didn't we all think about this
It's like,
before?
"You're
It
right,
can be
Matt."
blown
Yeah.
more than once.
Yeah.
My original score for this was a 7 out of 10. I would like to
Oof.
raise that up to like an 8.25 personally.
That's still not high enough, Richard. Mine is a 9.4. Still not high
Hey,
enough.
I gotta leave room to grow
I
because
know.
book 4 knocks everything out of the park.
What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today, I am joined again with a special guest from one of my favorite YouTube channels, Richard from 2toRamble. Hi, Richard.
Howdy.
And if you click on the video, obviously you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. We're talking about our favorite series of all time, Wheel of Time, book number deuce, The Great Hunt. Also, full spoilers for the first two books. Just getting that out of the way, because the last couple of times I've just kind of meandered, and it's like, oh hey, 15 minutes in the conversation, we're also not talking non-spoiler section. So there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, no, if you're watching this video at this point, like book 2 of a series, like, come on,
hmm
at this point.
Yeah. And then also just logistically, if you're a big fan of 2toRamble recently, they've changed their structure on how they rate things. And I am still mooching off of their old rating system. So if we're going through this and you're scratching your head asking why Richard is not talking about thoughtfulness or anything like that, it's because I hate to change things too quickly. So I'm still stuck in the original 5 categories for ratings. So
Oh,
that,
we'll get you
yeah,
there.
we'll get there
I
eventually, but
I
I'm not
still got
committed
my
to it
old
yet.
ratings, so that's what I'm using for this one.
All right, cool. So I guess before we even talk about emotional impact, what are some things on the reread that kind of surprised you, or you were excited to revisit, or just overall, what do you think about book 2 on the second reread here?
Oh, the second reread, I loved this book a lot more on
hmm
the reread. This I think this book in particular has some of the most um foreshadowing Easter eggs, especially in the beginning. Compared to like book 1, there's like 1 or 2 Easter eggs that kind of
hmm
paid off later on. In this one, some big stuff is teased.
hmm
And having already read it, I loved seeing it. Specifically, seeing the moments of Leandrin in the beginning of the book, of how
Yes.
she's channeling against Rand when she
hmm
shouldn't be able to, and going, Black Aja, got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing stuff like my favorite one is Varen. All
hmm
the
Yeah.
little trick that you find out, like, wait a minute, I think that was a lie. Did
Right.
Varen just lie there? And you don't know if it's, did she
Right.
lie? Is she just wrong? What do you
hmm
know? And
Right.
that's great to find out early on
hmm
because that's not paid off till what, book
I think
11
it's book. I think it's
or book 12?
11 or 12.
Yeah, so
It's
that's
yeah. It's
pretty
late.
awesome
Yeah.
to see that so early on.
hmm
Uh, on every single category. So from book 1 of, I think it's pretty good. Pretty good book. I
hmm
like The Eye of the World, but I definitely see its flaws. Like,
Right.
sure, I get it. Even on my first read, I was going like, I like one of these characters, that's about it. On the second read, almost every single one of my complaints
hmm
is improved upon.
hmm
So, yeah, this book was great.
hmm
Fantastic ending. I remember my first read, after finishing, I was like, "I'm hooked, I'm in."
Yeah.
This
No, I
was the
was
book that
yeah,
hooked me into Wheel of Time.
I was the same way. I was the one because I after our conversation in the first book, I was hooked. I feel like more than most people are after book 1, and I think
Mhm.
that was something that you were surprised about. But book 2 was like after this ended, I'm like, all right, I'm committed to the entire series. I don't care how long it takes me. If every book is going to end like this with quality, like I'm ready for it. So I was yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Something that I really enjoyed about this book that I think maybe some of the other books not as much is actually the prologue. I think aside from the first prologue from the first book, I think this is probably my second favorite prologue.
Completely agree.
Yeah, with the what is it? The man who calls himself Boris, or he who calls
Yeah.
himself. I forget exactly how it's phrased.
The really long title, yeah.
Yeah,
Man calls it wars, yeah.
yeah. And it's just fun, and then it's just like that, not that bit, but that line is committed throughout that entire prologue. Just like knowing, okay, he's not actually Boris, but this is the persona he's putting on behind the mask of, compared to the other um, dark friends. So yeah, I just thought it was great, and it kind of again sets the tone for the book. Like after book one, we kind of figure out, okay, now we know who the Dragon Reborn is. Now, like the setting is there. We kind of explored not the entire world, but a decent amount, enough to not be ignorant farm boys anymore. um, and kind of just get to explore more of it. But I think it's more plot heavy, in my opinion. Or the plot is better
Sure.
because of that.
Oh, yeah, the plot is much more tight. There's actually a really great through line throughout the whole thing.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel like there's kind of dropped plot or like I remember in book one, kind of like, okay, well, this is this section, the plot.
Hmm.
There's like multiple plots, and then at the very end, it kind of feels like it's all of a sudden like,
Right.
and we're going to the eye of the world.
Right.
It felt so weird
Hmm.
versus this one consistent plot of and thens of
Yeah.
one big long plot line. But with that prologue, I love the world building it does.
Hmm.
This is a great like start to the beginning of going, oh, okay, you get to see all the different cultures come together going,
Hmm.
okay, one, you see the reach of the dark one
Right.
of he has people everywhere. It's
Hmm.
not just like the vagrant, like the hobo off somewhere.
Right.
It's not that. He has people in power
Hmm.
everywhere. And you Robert Jordan doesn't tell you what who these people are, but if you
Hmm.
pay attention, you really can. Like
Right.
you can actually pinpoint later on in the books going, that was that person at the prologue. I
Hmm.
get it. I see it.
Yeah. Well, especially too. I forget what book it is, but when we actually have the reveal of he who calls himself Boris too, and like
Mhm.
just knowing, like even just that payoff alone just from that one character was really fun. And I actually on the reread when I was reading that prologue, I'm like, oh yeah, it's the guy who calls himself Boris. I remember there being the reveal, but I couldn't remember who it was. So I had to go back on the wiki and like look up who was Boris, and then realizing
Yeah.
who it was, I'm like, okay, here we go. And I just got more hype because more hype for it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
It's such a great setup for the perspective of the one like of the dark friends.
Hmm.
I really appreciated seeing inside their mind of kind of how in many ways it's they almost all of them have a nihilistic point of view. They
Hmm.
understand they're not it's not a they're tricked into serving the light. It's
Right.
not a, oh, think we're on the right side. It's no, the world is doomed.
Right.
Everything sucks.
Mhm.
Might as well get something as the world
Yeah, might
ends.
as well pick the winning side.
Yeah,
Right.
but they
Yeah.
know they're serving evil. And
Right.
I don't know, I like how pessimistic their
Mhm.
side is,
Mhm.
which is enjoyable to me and seeing their inside their own heads.
Yeah, well, even the man who calls himself Boris too, when Belazamon like shows himself, and then everyone's down bowing and like reciting the Dark Creed or whatever it is, and then in his mind he has to keep saying it's like, no, I don't serve the light anymore, and like so he's kind of still in that transition to being a true Dark friend
Yeah.
itself. So yeah, I agree. Being in their minds and really kind of pulling back the curtain. It's like of dark friends and kind of the hierarchy or structure, however it works. Because in the book one, it's like especially with Matt and Rand, where they interact with a lot of dark friends, and it's like there's dark friends around the corner. Like so, it's like dark friends are out there, but then it's actually seeing this is a room full of dark friends. This is literally a palace full of them. It's like okay, this is and like you said too, like all different cultures based off what they're wearing, the skin color, like the accents. It's like the reach is very far, but actually seeing that I think was a little more impactful than just thinking,
Mhm.
okay, they're just out in the shadow somewhere.
It does a great job of humanizing them without being going too far. Because I'm not a big fan of the sympathetic villain
Hmm.
archetype where like,
Hmm.
oh, they're the villain, they do all these evil things, but it's actually justified if you look from their point of view.
Yeah.
This one, it makes it human, but they are serving evil and they know it.
Right.
So it's good balance of like they're selfish humans that actually are taking personal gain over the good of all
Yeah.
ultimately. So
Hmm.
it's a great setup for me. I love the world building aspect of
Hmm.
it. It's a great setup for the last reveal, like the last
Mhm.
reveal in the end of this book
Yeah.
of Inktar. So
Mhm.
it's very important. I think
Mhm.
the prologue is vitally important for that reveal at the very end,
Mhm.
because then it makes him far more sympathetic, and also what he had to overcome to
Mhm.
betray the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. And to on the reread when Leandrin comes to was it Egwene's room and grabbed her and Nynaeve and
Hmm.
just and then later it's like more understanding why she took those steps. It's like, oh, she literally was told that this is your task. You have to go do this. The Shan are coming. Go give them to the Shan. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot
Yeah,
more sense. Because on the first time, I'm just like, first read through, I'm just like, she's just a bitch. Like, why single them
yeah,
out? Like, are you threatened? Like, I don't understand. Like, oh, they're connected to Rand, boo hoo. But actually understanding, no, she was ordered to do this. Because at that point, I was probably overwhelmed and missing a lot of things. So I don't think I really understood she was Black Aja until it was explicitly said, Leandrin's Black Aja. I'm like, okay, cool. So I think I kind of missed that. But on the reread, again, like you said, the importance of the prologue and like each Dark Friend had their own personal instructions, and that actually paying off later in the book, I think was really satisfying to see. So,
yeah.
um, mhm,
With all of that said, like, any time that the book goes out of its way, so it's one of those things of you have to appreciate Robert Jordan's like over explanation of things.
mhm,
Like when people complain, like, oh, he, is describing the details of the buttons.
yeah,
Well, that's important when you're trying to identify a dark friend. He doesn't
right,
give names. You
right,
see the button and you go,
mhm,
ah, I get it now. And when you
mhm,
see the button again, you go, I
mhm.
understand where we're at.
And it actually shows a lot for the characterization too. If the character recognizes those buttons from before, because if Robert Jordan's describing something, most of the time that means that the character is noticing those things. So if he doesn't explain
Mhm.
that thing when you're in, say, Rand's perspective, and that either means Rand is glazing over it and not paying attention to it, or he just physically doesn't see it, right?
Sure.
So I think it not only is it world building and all those things, but I think it's actually characterization as well, and it masterfully done.
Mm, that's really interesting. A good point.
Because it's like the way he writes Robert Jordan. It's like very little is it like out, like not in somebody's head.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this too on the reread for me was kind of more enlightened, or at least this certain point is because I did a lot of this reading with audio, which normally I haven't done in the past. Everything was just physical words on a page.
Hmm.
But just because of commute and less time to actually read, can cram more of that in with audiobook. And Libby has been a godsend for that. But actually hearing the narrator say the things and hearing somebody say it, I think made that click for me more. Where it's like, okay, we're in Nynaeve's head. She's seeing these things, but she doesn't notice these things. But another character does. I think that's why characterization from Robert Jordan is amazing, or one of the ways that makes it amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if so. One, Robert Jordan does a great job of giving great character voice,
Mm-hmm.
even if the character voice can sometimes annoy people. I know Nynaeve, the braid
Mm-hmm.
tugging, and just her being kind of an asshole
Yeah.
sometimes. I get it,
Yeah.
but also it's such a clear character voice, and
Mm-hmm.
also great characterization of what
Right.
she sees versus what Elaine sees.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine sees a lot more of the
Right.
details of how people are acting.
Mm-hmm.
From It's why I kind of get sucked into it, because when Nynaeve is there, I
Mm-hmm.
see why she's frustrated.
Yeah.
And then you swap to Elaine and you go, "Oh, Nynaeve is being crazy.
Right.
She she's
Yeah.
out of her mind."
Mm-hmm.
So it works really well that way.
Yeah. But I'm gonna give Nynaeve props for this book. Like, I understand why she's your girl. Like, she is a great plot mover because she just
Mhm.
does things, right? So it's like with the whole Shan
Yeah.
Shan last act of the book, and like Egwene gets captured, and Nynaeve's like, I don't care, we're gonna go save her, and then actually making things happen because she just does it.
Mhm.
Makes me appreciate her a lot more on the reread instead of just, come on, Nynaeve, you're just being arrogant. But it's like,
Yeah.
no, she's just making things happen. She's looking out for her people.
Ultimately, she's bold,
Yeah.
and she's very much an active character, even though she's wrong so many
Hmm.
times. Her positive qualities do shine.
Hmm.
Yeah, especially in this book, which irked me with the show of the show took away her biggest moments that I
Mhm.
appreciated. So, but we're not talking about the show.
We're not. I haven't watched a single thing of the show. I'm proud to say. I've
Good.
heard only negative things, and I have no intention of wasting any more time with it.
Wonderful. Wonderful opinion.
So I'm apologize to all the show watchers, but I'm assuming if you're watching a video like this, you probably didn't watch the show or didn't like the show. So that's
Yeah.
my opinion on that one. So I guess before we get too off track, what was your overall score for The Great Hunt?
So my overall score, and I would just this is a change from the previous video that I did on our channel. I just want to give it an 8.25. That's what I want to give it. I think it's
Respectable.
really great.
hmm
It's,
Do you remember
I
what
love
it
it.
was? What you did rate it originally with Austin?
I
If
had
not,
it
that's fine.
as
I just was curious.
oh, don't. I originally had it as 7.4, but that's the average.
Oh, yeah,
So we don't
that's
do
fair.
averages anymore.
Right. Okay,
So
that's cool.
I just
Eight
want to
point
give
two
it
five.
8.25.
That's cool. That's way better. Because what was it? 6.75 for Eye of the World you had.
Yeah,
So significantly better.
I think it's a big step up. What
Yeah.
did you give it?
So I kind of had the high ceiling very high with Eye of the World being 9.2. So there isn't much room to do it without just going huge. So I did give Great Hunt 9.26. Again, I know that's kind of why you guys are moving away or moved away from your old rating just because it's average. Sometimes it's hard to like is 600ths really that much better than what it is a better book. So 9.26 is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Hey, fantastic score. I won't fight you on it
Good.
because yeah, we both agree it's amazing.
Yeah.
But
So I guess just jumping into the next one, emotional impact I had is 9.1, which is a little higher than I had for Eye of the World. I had Eye of the
mhm,
World is an 8.9. So I was more invested into it. And I think that's because of things um Sean Chen coming over from the West and just exploring more like with the White Cloaks, like I said, that prologue with that curtain being pulled back from the Dark Friends, just a lot of things like that.
yeah, no, I gave it a 7.75
Nice.
originally,
hmm
and hell, I could be convinced to raise it even higher myself
hmm
because I'm thinking of so for character work, I was emotionally invested in seeing Rand's growth in this
hmm
book. For me, a floored moment that I absolutely loved was when Rand, after being separated from the group for so long, is running out of a burning building going, "Ah, they beat up her and they took the horn again." And then you see, Inktar and, am I saying the name right?
I don't know. I'm terrible with names. I'm the
Always
worst
ter
person to ask. I always like
Yeah.
Nynaeve. I pronounce her name three different ways, and people in the comments make fun of me. You know who I'm talking about. I don't care.
Yeah.
But I
But
think
yeah,
yeah, Inktar. I think is how you say it.
Inktar, Matt and Perrin. And from their perspective, they see how much Rand has changed.
hmm
Of, oh, he's filling out those noble clothes. Like
Yeah.
he is taking charge,
hmm
leadership. He orders Ingtar around, going like, "The horn is here. We're going this way."
hmm
Like
And then he
I
catches
love
himself. He's
it.
like, "I'm sorry, Inktar. I didn't mean to like take charge." And Inktar's like, "No, you're right. This is what we should do."
Go ahead. You've thought it out. Won't refuse a good order.
Moraine chose a great second for me.
Yeah, I loved those moments. That
hmm
was one of my favorites. But so just character moments, loved it.
hmm
The action was, I think, significantly better from
hmm
the first book, especially the climax being how bombastic it is of the
Yeah.
different plot lines that came together with finally, Rand having another battle in the sky type deal and
Yeah.
just mm,
hmm
lovely. I
Well, especially
I
too
was
knowing,
emotionally invested through the whole thing.
and then with the battle in the sky, like just knowing, like how far, like even like what's her name, Elidia, when she's spoilers. I probably shouldn't say this, but when she's in her seat of power later in the series, and then she has the painting of that image, and she's looking at it like every day, and she's just gets so angry, and that's book like 9, 10, I think,
Yeah.
like so just having things. like that callback to what we just read, I think is really fun. Like knowing that this is going to have repercussions for the rest of the series because it's like now everybody knows. Everyone's saying, "Hey, it's the Dragon Reborn came back and fought the Dark One in the sky." That's what the common farmer is saying. That was in Tanchico or whatever. Amin's head. I don't know.
Tanchico.
Whatever. Where they're around that area. See, I'm terrible with names, you guys. And they saw it themselves, and that's just what. Yes, I don't
Yeah,
know what
no,
I'm trying to
there's
say, but you know what I'm trying to say.
every moment of in here. There's so many emotional moments to talk about. There's Egwene. Everything with Egwene was
Yeah.
great in this
Mhm.
book. I didn't like her that much in book one. I
Mhm.
really started to like her in book two, and
Mhm.
especially the repercussions that it sets up for. It makes her such
Yeah.
a compelling character for even directly after the her time with the Shanshan has
Mhm.
lasting consequences to
Yeah.
her psyche. It
Right.
it truly it she comes back, but she's a little broken
Yeah.
and takes a lot of time for that to be fixed.
And
So
I
her
think.
fixation on
Mhm.
freedom and never being chained down and locked
Right.
down again.
Mhm. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the general consensus is by the end of the series, a lot of people don't like Egwene. And I never really understood why. I think a lot of people's like, oh, she's just very arrogant. Honestly, it sounds like it's a lot of the same complaints that people don't like Nynaeve at the beginning, but then at the end
Mhm.
kind of warm up. But it's kind of the opposite where people are like, oh, Egwene's whatever, but then she gets more
My
and more annoying.
my theory to that is I only dislike Egwene scenes when
Hmm.
it's Egwene and Gawain.
So then in my argument, it's
Not
not
the
her fault, it's
favorite.
his fault.
It's his fault. No, it's
Yeah.
100% his fault. I will stand by him being the worst character in the Wheel of Time.
Yeah,
By
100%.
far. By
Mhm.
far. I like his brother significantly more,
Significantly
and
more,
his
which I
brother's a
didn't think
white
I
wolf.
would. At the beginning, I like especially in this book too, where it's like, "Oh, he's just so beautiful. He's amazing at everything he does. He can do no wrong. He's gonna do whatever he thinks he's 100% right, even if it's gonna hurt people." It's like, okay, that sound I don't know, I don't think I'd get along with that guy. And then Gon
He's
seems
far
like a
more.
little more likable, but then, yeah, as the series goes on, he's less and less likable. But anyway, my
Yeah.
point was going to be that people towards the end don't like Egwene, but I think, like you said, in this book, it kind of cemented my like for her, like her tenacity and just her grit, and like she doesn't want to be in that situation ever again.
Mhm.
And just like how that changes her psyche, it just made me empathize with her a lot. And like I kind of have this experience for her in the back of my head every time she does anything, pretty much. So,
She's the character out of all the Emmons Field fivers, out
mhm,
of the Emmons Fielders,
sure,
is both willing to change and wants to change.
yeah,
Everyone else,
hmm,
including Nynaeve, had
hmm,
struggled so hard with changing their role in their life.
hmm,
Nynaeve can't get away from being the wisdom. Rand
yeah,
can't get away from wanting to be a farm boy. Same with
hmm,
Perrin is always I'm the blacksmith.
yeah,
Matt is like, "Oh, I'm not a hero.
right,
I'm a rapscallion."
yeah,
And none of
hmm.
them have can just accept that. Egwene is the only one who's like, "I want to be different. I
Yeah,
want to change."
yeah, as soon as Moraine's like, "Hey, you have the spark. You should come with me." Moraine's like, "Okay, bet." Immediately.
I insist on
Yeah.
coming on this adventure.
Right.
Every She seizes every opportunity that's available to her and she makes her own.
Mhm,
Like she that's why it's enjoyable to see her push things in a different direction, even if she can be like every single woman in the Wheel of Time,
mhm.
kind of a dick to guys.
Yeah,
Like ultimately just like, can't you be a little understanding? But that's
right,
every single person in the
right,
entire Wheel of Time. Like men don't understand come on, can't you be a little understanding of
right,
the women in your life?
right.
That's both sides, so
Yeah.
it's not an exclusive negative to Egwene, and it is if I think it's unfair to
Mhm,
judge, like, Egwene's, sexism toward
mhm.
men and, like, that being a real negative to you versus Matt's sexism, and
Right,
that not bothering you. I think
right.
it's nearly the same.
Mhm. But I think.
In sometimes I would say it's comes down to their actions because Egwene
Mhm,
can do really messed up things to the guys in her life.
right.
versus Matt will say a bunch of terrible things, but ultimately do the right thing. Like,
Right.
Matt has some more hero moments, but that's
Yeah. I think on
neither
top of
here nor
that point, though, I think the reason that like what Egwene does with this her sexism affects people more, I think it's just because of her relationship with Rand and how they were basically promised to each other since they were children. So it's like you
there.
would think she would be a little, I don't know, warmer towards Rand at least, but then it turns to not.
It's
you know?
frustrating. It
Yeah.
as going forward, that's probably the most frustrating thing is that she doesn't understand the position that Rand is in
Hmm.
and still kinda heavily judges him.
Yeah.
It really it seems like she doesn't even make the attempt to understand what he's going through.
Yeah.
I think that's the most frustrating part, which,
Yeah.
1, makes it really clear on why she's not the love interest.
Yes. Yes. Well, because I think I forget what book it is, but I think it's like many, many books for her to realize Rand isn't the same man that I was in love with back in Emmons Field. He is a completely different person, and I'm a
It
completely different person. Like they literally
Yeah.
grew apart, and it takes her a long. I think it takes her way longer than anyone else to realize that maybe I've changed a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and you're right. So, and because of that, she doesn't recognize anything that he like any of his hardships because in her mind it doesn't exist because he's the same guy.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the frustrating emotional aspect of when you see her and Rand together, it can
hmm
sometimes be frustrating.
hmm
But other than
yeah,
that, I really loved her scenes with
hmm
Egwene. So Egwene, we got like those. What are some of the other big emotional scenes for you?
yeah. So, I think kind of like that climax at the end, like the big fight in the sky. But even before that, I forget his like High Lord Tyrak or something like the Shang-Chan Blade Master.
Oh,
I
yes,
forget
yes,
I
yes.
forget what his
Uh,
actual
Turok.
I don't know. See, you guys, I'm
Mm,
terrible with names. I'm sorry.
that's fine.
But their battle was really interesting. And kind of even just before that, when I think it was chapter 1 or chapter 2, when Lan, kind of like we talked at the end of last video, like Lan's relationship with Rand and him training him in the way of the sword, and him just saying, "You're good. You're like you have the skills, you have the balance. Like I teach you something once and you hang on to it, but it's like it's gonna take me. I don't have years to train you to be a blade master." And then at the end of the book, Rand's out here actually defeating a blade master. In People kind of argue with me on this, but I feel like he is a blade master now. Like he defeated a blade master, right? Like didn't get
Barely.
yeah,
He's like barely a blade master,
yeah,
and he wins by like the sheathing of the sword, like going, "I'm gonna
yeah,
accept the
right,
killing blow
yeah.
to do it."
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
it's even funny too because even a couple scenes before that, I think Inktar is telling Rand, or maybe a couple chapters, because Rand's like just doing forms and he's doing the one that like if you don't want it's just for balance. You don't want to do in battle because it leaves you open. And like Inktar says that a couple chapters before, and then Rand goes and uses that to actually defeat the Blade Master. I just think is a really great
Mhm.
touch.
Yeah.
Kind of to your point, where it's like a normal Blade Master might not do that.
Y No, a
Yeah,
nearly suicidal move.
yeah,
It is a suicidal move, but
mhm,
he's willing to do it, and that's why
yeah,
he wins.
yeah.
It's not really that his skills necessarily were better than his.
That's fair.
It's he's more desperate, and
Yeah.
he's willing to go do anything,
And what I think is
which
funny, what I think is funny too, and maybe I missed this on my first read through, but during that battle, like Inktar, Perrin, and Matt, they all go and chase the other, not chase or get chased by the other soldiers and trying to fight their way out. And then it's just the Blade Master and Rand are fighting, and then Rand wins, and then they immediately come back. So no one actually sees Rand defeat him, which I just think is
Mhm.
hilarious too. Where it's like, I mean, Rand is very humble about it. He's just like, I won. I did what I had to do. He's not like, oh yeah, I beat a Blade Master. Um, but it's like no one actually witnessed him. No one witnessed to see that, so which kind of made me a little sad for Rand. It's like if like
Mm.
Perrin or Matt saw that, you'd be like, oh my God, Rand, you're so good. I just think that would be like a kind of fun story point, but we didn't get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a caring thing of that is a humbling experience. That's Rand's victory
Hmm.
against a blade master. Like
Hmm.
that's so fighting with a sword against a blade master. That's Rand fighting versus him
True.
going against the Dark One,
Hmm.
the one that calls himself the Dark One.
Yeah. Yeah. There
Um,
you go.
that is the dragon's victory.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a consistent theme throughout of people see who do people see when they talk to Rand? Do they see Rand al'Thor? Or do they see the dragon?
Yeah, that's fair.
And those positions aren't the same, and he sometimes alienates from himself, and
Mhm.
it's for the dragon to win, Rand has to lose sometimes. So it's
Yeah.
those balancing aspect of it. So yeah,
Mhm.
no one gets to see Rand's victory, but
Yeah.
everyone has to see the dragon's victory.
No, that's a great way to put it. Like, that's poetry, you know? Like, that's actually I've never thought about it like that, and that's really cool. That makes me like that scene even much more.
Yeah.
So
Especially with you see all the different scenes of how Matt and Perrin just like, who are you, Rand?
mhm.
Why are you dressing up in all these fancy clothes? You know, like you're a farm boy. What are you doing? Too
Right.
big for your britches.
Yeah. Well, and kinda even to that point too, where it's like Moraine knows what she's doing, where she forces him to wear that because that's all he has to wear, and then people outside of Matt and Perrin who know he's just a farm boy kinda just see him like, was it Heron or the sniffer? I forget his name.
I think it's Hurin.
Hurin. When then he just is
Shame.
calling like
I'm
in
terrible at names too.
no,
So
you're good. And even just the Borderlanders too, they're just like, "Oh, it's Lord Rand, Lord Althor." So it's like just because even if he's not giving off that aura, like he is because of what he's wearing. So
mhm.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So I agree. So what do you
Yeah,
got for characters as far as rating?
as we were talking about, I gave it a again 7.25. I thought it was really great.
Yeah, I did the same as I did last book, which is a 9.2. I just love all the characters
Yeah.
so much.
For this book, it's a lot easier to say which characters didn't work as well for me.
Mhm.
And I would say the only significant character that I felt really dropped a step, or not even dropped a step, it was about the same as book one, is Matt.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
I
Matt
do
isn't Matt until book
yeah.
three.
I do think he is better than book 1. I think it just we don't get as much Matt. I think if it's I think if it was the same Matt as book 1, but like let me rephrase. If it was the same amount of Matt as book 1 after his change with the dagger at the end of book 1 or beginning of book 2, I forget. I think
Sure.
we would like him more at this point, but I think it's because it's we still are maybe a little soured from book 1 and because it's less Matt screen time. Personally, is how I see it.
Mhm.
That's maybe why it's not as great, but I agree. He's probably the least favorite
He's
out of
also
at this point.
still sort of tainted by the dagger,
That's
not
true.
fully. So his personality is still off,
That's
and
true.
how he treats Rand is frustrating in the beginning. Of like you don't like him. So
Yeah.
both his relationship with Rand is like going, "Come on, man,
Mhm.
don't do that to your boy."
I
And
know.
same thing with Perrin. Of
Yeah.
Perrin on of all of his friends,
Mhm.
Perrin has is in the unique situation of can really understand Rand.
Yeah.
Under specifically the point of Perrin is going through changes and he doesn't know what he's afraid he's going to turn into a monster
Mhm.
with all these new abilities and powers coming up for him.
Right.
That's literally Rand.
Yeah,
Rand is
and
also terrified of the monster he's
yeah,
going to become and kill those he loves.
and he doesn't know who he can tell. It's like
Yeah.
there's even I think that we're in Perrin's head at some point, and he even wants he's like, I need to tell Rand what's going on. He knows my secret. I know his secret. I should tell him my secret. But then he never ends up doing it just because of the people that are around him. He can't pull him aside. It's like I think
Mhm.
he says like Varen's right here. Like I can't tell him in front of Varen.
Yeah.
So no, I agree.
Which
Yeah.
again, why I like Perrin more in this book,
hmm
and for many other books, I love Perrin. He's definitely one of the better friends.
Perrin is a phenomenal friend. Yes. Something I can't kind of going back to Matt for a second. I remember in my first read through at the end of this book when he blew the horn. I was so mad at him. I'm like, this should be Rand's. Like it was even set up where everyone was like, oh yeah, Rand, like the Dragon Reborn is just gonna uh, sound the horn. I was trying to think of the word.
Mhm.
And then Rand does it, and it kind of takes that option away from him. I was like really mad. I'm like, this isn't supposed to be a cool moment. But then I think again later it pays off much later. I'm like, all right, Matt, this you're the sound bearer or the horn bearer.
It's definitely a great aspect of one, the reason why Rand is not a complete Mary Sue. A big aspect
hmm
of what makes a Gary Stu character
Sure.
is that every character around them becomes irrelevant. That's kind of a very key aspect is they're so good at everything
Yeah.
that no other characters really needed, and the surrounding friends are just there to make
Hmm.
like the Gary stew look good.
That's fair.
In this case, Rand is he has these some could say he de- his way to focus on the flame, like
Hmm.
the flame in the void, allows him to become a blade master pretty darn quickly, and
Yeah.
all of his abilities, he's super powerful, all this stuff. But
Hmm.
ultimately, he's not. Everyone else is also necessary.
Right.
Matt is the horn bearer.
Right.
He ultimately saves the day,
Hmm.
and that connection, and also just his thinking of quick thing. Everyone, all the prophecy saying that it will be blown at the last battle.
Hmm.
If, and he's gone, why can't it? Why can't it be blown twice?
Yeah. Yeah.
Prophecy
Well,
never said it couldn't be
yeah.
blown more than once.
Once I
Let's do it.
got to that line again this time, I literally laughed out loud. I'm like, oh, that's such Matt. That's such a Matt saying.
That's a Matt thought. Everyone else being afraid of prophecy and going like, "Oh, we must stick to the prophecy." Rand be focused, dead set.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to keep to the letter of the prophecy,
Yeah.
and Matt finds he
Hmm.
finds the loophole through it. Going, wait, why didn't we all think about this
It's like,
before?
you're
It
right,
could be
Matt.
blown
Yeah.
more than once.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, Matt maybe wouldn't have done that if he didn't know like the consequences of being the horn bearer. Like, because I don't think he knows at that point. Because it's later when I think he's surprised, where it's like, yeah, the horn bearer, like it's bound to you until your death. And then he's like, oh, I didn't know that. Maybe I wouldn't have done it then.
Well, the thing is, and what you love about Matt that you find out is he still would have done it. He may complain
Yeah.
about it,
Hmm.
but if it's for his friends, he will do what's right, even at great personal sacrifice.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, what other
They,
characters do you love? We only talked about like three of them, and it's been a good couple minutes.
I'm next best one to talk about. I don't think there's a ton
Hmm.
from Perrin in this one, if I'm
No,
remembering right. Like
not really.
he's there. You get a bit more with him
Hmm.
willing to work with the wolves and
Yeah.
not shut them out,
Hmm.
and so you get a bit more of that, which you like seeing that develop. But it's
Hmm. Yeah, it's
not
like that,
anything
and
too
then
big.
he gets, and then it's developed because I think in this book the wolves name him as Young Bull too, so we kind
Hmm.
of get that to that point. We get that little bit of that progression, um, especially when after Hurin gets pulled away with Rand and Loyal when they're in the like the upside down or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
the mirror world. And then Perrin's like, well, shoot, we still got to follow Pat and Fane. It's like, I have this ability. Like, should I tell Ingtar? Like, I know I can do it. So, and then he finally does. He's like, I'm a sniffer. And so he like finds a way around it.
Well,
But still commits to it.
I think Inktar actually tells him going like because he tells him these abilities of like, yeah, I can talk to wolves, and he's like,
Mhm.
okay, I
Yeah,
believe you, but
that's true.
tell the guys you're a sniffer.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
not
true. You're
actually
right. That
go that
wasn't fair.
far.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no,
So,
so he's pretty good.
mhm,
We talked briefly about Nynaeve,
mhm,
which my girl, she's just even better in this book of we
yeah,
find out that she has the block, like
mhm,
specifically she can't channel unless she's angry.
right,
So it gives justification of you get to see a few times of how she deliberately makes herself angry
mhm,
just to use her powers, and
yeah,
that's it's a nice way to integrate her personality to it. But
mhm,
yeah, like you're talking about with she is so gung ho and on protecting her tribe of
mhm,
oh yeah, the Shan Chan have captured all this stuff. Like, no, we're going. We're
mhm,
gonna save her now.
yeah,
Just barreling ahead, and everyone has to kind of like hold her back. Of
mhm,
Elaine going like, think about a plan for a minute. Like,
yeah.
no, we're doing
Well,
it
and that's the
now.
thing. I was just gonna say too. It's like on the surface, it seems like she doesn't really have a plan. But then after her conversation with Bail Doman, where after she got out of there, she's like, I can't like couldn't crack it all. Like I just had to keep going at him. I just had to keep going at him. If I gave him anything, then he would doubt. And then like so, it's like she sort like yes, she just went on the attack with that conversation to get him to commit to sail them out of Toman Head or Flam or whatever city, whatever it is. Um, so it's like she had and then after she got out, then she's like, okay, I'm so glad I had experience with going against the council and going with like being the wisdom and having that experience, because if she didn't, then she probably would have faltered, and then that deal with him probably would have cracked, and then they would be back to square one with how are we going to take care of Egwene. So yes, on the surface, I agree. That's how I always thought of her as well. But after that interaction and picking up that note where it's like she did have a plan, it's like okay, naive, I can respect that.
Well, she realizes that a leader, and so this is a lesson that Rand learns much, much later, is that if you are a leader, it doesn't well, also Perrin learns the same thing, but
Hmm.
as a leader, it doesn't always benefit the people that you are leading to show
Hmm.
that you have doubts.
Yeah,
That is not always a great strategy of, even
yeah,
if you don't know what you're doing,
hmm,
look like you know what you're doing because
yeah,
everyone else is following you, and you're gonna sow the seeds of destruction for your
hmm,
group if
yeah.
you
I
don't
think,
look like you're
mhm.
competent,
Yeah,
even in the terrible moments.
to that point, even in this book, Rand I think is starting to realize that when both Loyal and her Heron, whatever the Sniffer, is looking at him when they're in the mirror world, they're like, "How do we get out of here, Rand?" And Rand sort of knows it's maybe because he can channel, so maybe it happened in his sleep, whatever. So he's like, "I'm the one that has to get out of here," and then so yes, I think he's starting to understand that. And I think it's kind of mirrored there. So.
It's a fine line between what you show everyone and
Hmm.
so one fake, not faking, but looking like you know what you're doing,
Hmm.
even in the moments you don't, but also not being so arrogant to always think that you're on your own and you
Hmm.
can't listen to good counsel. And it's that balance of like to everyone, you need to look like you're a very strong leader who knows what they're doing.
Hmm.
And then within your inner circle, being able to admit that you have doubts and move
Hmm.
forward and actually ask questions and listen to people.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of these characters too, like Perrin and Rand, I think that lesson is kind of learned once they assume the responsibility of leader, because they both very early on in their leadership are resistant to it, especially Perrin. It's like, I'm not a
Yeah.
lord, I don't want to be the leader of these people, like choose someone else. There's more qualified, smarter people, have more experience. But it's like people are looking at him anyway. And so it's like once he assumes that mantle, it's like, okay, fine, I'll be leader. Then it's like all of a sudden, then he's aware of these things, like, okay, you're right, I have to be confident even if I'm not in front of the tribe. So just,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
great character moments.
but we see that lesson in Nynaeve pretty early
Mhm.
on,
Yeah.
which is an enjoyable aspect to see of she has the heart, she has the wisdom, but she still has the arrogance of
Mhm.
she thinks her being wisdom is enough.
Mhm.
And she needs to listen to people like Elaine more often, and she doesn't. So
Mhm.
that's her big thing to get over. Where everyone else, all the other lemon fielders need to learn how to accept leadership.
Mhm.
She needs to learn how to accept counsel.
Yeah.
So different lessons that they learn.
Mhm.
But I loved her big moments of actually using the one power and being
Yeah.
it and her actually saving Egwene, and it's just one it
I know.
just binds the three
Mhm.
gals,
Mhm.
the party that ultimately goes forward for the rest of the book. You kind of always see
Right.
it's some combination of Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve, and then
Mhm.
later on some additional people. But those three, this whole book really binds them together and why they're so close.
Mhm. And then I thought it was a funny scene too, like after, like at the very end of the book, when Min is there, when Rand wakes up, he's like, "Oh, Egwene, like, did I save her? Like, what happened?" And then Min's like, "Yeah, we saved her. Like, what saved her? You fool! Like,
What the-
what are you talking about?" It's like, "What are you talking about? Like, where'd you guys come from?" So no, I agree. Like, I think that's a great moment for those girls, especially
It's also
for.
real.
Mhm, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's enjoyable how that whole scene comes together. I
Hmm.
like how everyone just kind of multiple sides are now trying to save Egwene, and then like the White Cloaks come. Like it's been set up. Everything was
Right.
all the puzzle pieces were laid up to this ultimate ball of chaos.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then
Just
by the end of it, it's
yeah.
going,
The
wait,
dominoes
who
are
saved
all
who?
lined
Did
up
I
and just
win?
watching them fall. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, wait, what happened to that army? Don't worry, Matt took care of it.
Yeah.
What about Egwene? Oh, don't worry. 90 minute we got it. It's fine. It's
Yeah.
just okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and then it's kind of um rhymed again, like at the very, I think the very last couple pages where it's like all these different perspectives, like across the country or the countryside, where it's like everybody's perspective, where it's like, oh, this is what the farmer heard, or this is what the rumor is in this town. It's like that's kind of what is going. Like nobody really knows what's going on. Like even just hearing the rumors of, oh, Arthur Hawkwing's armies came back, and oh, I heard that they got pushed to the sea and now they went back. So it's like hearing all these conflicting things, but things that also stacked on top of each, like, is very satisfying. Where it's like we don't really know what happened if you're outside of the characters that were actually there.
Oh yeah, miscommunication is a huge theme in this entire series.
Hmm.
Not just miscommunication between characters, because men and women miscommunicate all the time.
Right.
They're always talking past each other.
Hmm.
But it's not just that; it's miscommunication over just time and distance.
Hmm.
So the battle of Fallen, and like the farmers some distance away don't know what actually happened.
Hmm.
And so it takes huge events of literally Rand fighting the Dark One in the sky.
Right.
Like that picture, that's the only thing that people kind of actually know is true. They
Hmm.
know that happened because it was such a big event, but every other detail surrounding it, people don't really know what happened
Right.
because
And I think
depending on how
events,
far away.
yeah, and I think events like that we see where it's like there's bits of truth in it, but we don't, like, the people who are talking about it don't know the whole thing. Where I think we see that most when we're in the White Tower, when it's like the different
Mm,
Aes Sedai are talking to each other, like, oh, I heard a rumor out in Camlin that this is happening, or over on the spine of the world, like this is happening, and people are like, oh, don't give in to rumors and that, and then it's like cut to that a couple books later, a couple chapters later, and it's like things are actually happening, or oh, someone took the tears broken, or the stone and tears broken, like, oh, that cut to Rand breaking the stone of tear.
yeah.
So I think I to your point, I think like the most what's the word, like black and white, is when we're in the tower hearing those rumors, and then our characters are going and actually seeing those events, or actually made those events happen. I think is
Mhm.
like the most satisfying.
Yeah, I'm trying to think some other characters. I think one of the last characters, unless you can think of someone else
Hmm.
that I wanted to just briefly talk about, was Inktar for this
Hmm.
book. I think he's done so well
Yeah.
in this book. On the first read through did not see it. Did
Hmm.
not see his um
Betrayal.
the betrayal of him going to the Dark One or
Hmm.
him being a dark friend.
Yeah.
But it makes so much sense.
Hmm.
And by the end, I really love his heroic sacrifice of one. It's also important to show that y- a a dark friend can actually come back to the
Be
light.
redeemed. Yeah.
That's very important to show,
Hmm.
especially characters to come.
Hmm.
Of they're not irredeemable. They've made a portrait, and it's hard to get at. And ultimately, it's something that will cost your life to come back to the light.
Right.
But
Hmm.
it's more heroic.
Right. And I think it gave, I mean, to divert from him again for a second, I think that gave Rand a great character moment too. When after he revealed that to Rand, and he said, this is my last stand. You go do your thing, like go escape, take the horn, do your thing you got to do." And then Rand gave him basically his last burial rites. He was like, "You know you're going to die. Like, I'm giving you the respect man to man." And I think that, like, for me, that just gave me more respect for Rand too. And I think Inktar too is like, wow, thank you, Rand. Like, I'm gonna die in the
Uh,
light today.
especially him not telling everyone that he was a dark
Yes.
friend.
Yeah.
He takes that secret. He
Hmm.
takes that secret with him, and it you could see it in the kind of like the big old Jesus type of way of him
Hmm.
being the dragon reborn, the avatar for the light.
Yeah.
Him burying Inktar
Hmm.
like a follow the light, giving him the final burial rites is almost in a way of forgiving your sins of like, no, you did come back into the light
Hmm.
at the very end, and so you kind of an absolution type deal. So I think it's apt that Rand is the one that kind of forgives his betrayal
Hmm.
and forgives him being a dark friend.
Yeah. So yeah, no, he was a great character. And I'm not gonna lie, I on the second read through, I knew he was the one that betrayed the other Shinarans. Um,
Hmm.
but I kind of forgot, like, I was trying to pay attention to the scene, like when the assassin comes and like shoots the arrow at Rand, but or not Rand really, or Armelin Seat, whatever, and then like letting the Trollocs come in. I'm like, I couldn't remember. Like, I knew it's Inktar, but how did he do this alone and all this stuff? And I don't know. So I was
I
trying
picked
to
up
like
more.
pay attention and like pick up the little
Yeah,
bits of what I remembered, but
I picked up more on the details with the prologue
Mhm.
and especially his desperation. Like, him being the most desperate to get the horn and
Mhm.
how obsessed he was with it, where
Yeah.
everyone else like, everyone's also down for this mission, but
Yeah.
Ingtar is
Yeah.
especially kinda going nutso.
I know everyone's like, "Come on, pace yourselves, man. Like the
Yeah.
horses, they can only go so far." He's like, "No, we got to do it today. Got to do it. Like have to." And then even Heron's like, "What do you mean we have to? Like just the wheel weaves is the way wheel wills. Weave the
Mhm.
wheel
The
wills.
wheel
Whatever.
is the wheel
Thank
wills.
you."
Yeah.
So, and I think that kind of highlighted too, because there are like if you're paying attention, like there are snippets. Like you probably, if you really paying attention, you could probably get it on a first read through. But
Yeah.
again, on a second read through, you appreciate it way more because you actually know the context.
Yeah.
So,
Then we got other so
hmm
brief mentions of like we get more of Min this time.
hmm
Her we get to see more of her connection to Rand and the
hmm
prophecies that is foretold about him, like knowing that he will she is in love with him, but then
hmm
there will be two more.
yeah. And then it's
And
kind of and like you can sort of assume that it's Egwene and Elaine because like Elaine's like obviously madly in love with Rand as well. But then she's like, "Oh yeah, it's someone you haven't even met yet, Rand." Like in her head, she's having this conversation. She's like, "Oh, who's this fourth girl? Like if there's three, what's happening to who's going to be the one that falls off?" And I think we can
we
sort
also
of
have
yeah,
Min, I believe, tells Egwene that it's like it's not Rand. Like you're not it.
yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
we have yeah, so it's like going
Yeah, that's true.
Rand's not the one you're in love with. It's like, what do you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
but that's a one it sets up nicely of why Min is probably the best love interest for Rand, of how much
hmm
she cares for him
hmm
and actually doesn't just want things out of him. The only thing she wants is what's best for him,
hmm
not the Dragon Reborn, where
Right. And it
to
probably
some
makes the
degree
most
why I don't like
believable.
Elaine.
Yeah.
Like uh, to some degree I don't like their relationship where it always seemed to me like Elaine likes the Dragon Reborn.
hmm
She doesn't like Rand.
Yeah. That's fair. And I
And
think
she
too that
wants the
makes
she's attracted to the power, she's
right.
attracted to him being, you know, larger than life.
And I think that's the
So,
daughter heir in her.
mhm. Yeah, that's just part of it. Like I know people will argue against that. I
hmm
understand.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with a later character, which I find is more. It's just I don't even really see much love there. It's just
Right.
a
It's almost
thing of
like
passion.
obligation, I would say.
Yeah,
Where it's kind of
versus
like the Tavira
Min.
nature is working
Mhm.
for Rand's favor against her. And I think if, even later in the series, I think Min even acknowledges like, is this really like my wish, or is this just because he's Taviran and like, So,
Mhm.
but I think what I'm trying to say is that Min out of the three, at the end of the day, I think is the most believable love interest, just because, especially at the end of this book, like she's there for him in all these little moments. Like you said, she's there for Rand. She's not there for the Dragon Reborn, even when she
Yeah.
finds out who he really is or what he really is.
Well, every other love interest ultimately they put their own goals ahead of his.
hmm
And for good reason. They have great responsibility. They have to.
hmm
It's completely understandable. They have other things they got to do. They also never really betray Rand either. They don't do that.
hmm
But Min's the only one that really goes screw everything else. Screw the whole last battle or all of that. No.
Right.
None of that. I'm here for Rand.
hmm
What does Rand need? That's why I like Min.
Yeah, and I think on the first read through, I think I liked Elaine the most out of the three, like as a love interest, which I know we just said she's probably not the
Mhm.
greatest. But I think on the second reread and like really knowing what Min does for Rand throughout the series, I think she's easily my favorite out of the three. Like as
Oh
far as the
yeah.
love interest goes.
I mean, there's plenty of great moments between them where the
hmm
rest there's not that many moments, especially.
Right. Yeah. Well,
But yeah,
especially once like Elaine and Rand in next book, sort of spoilers, are just like we love each other. We're like taking kisses in the hallways and stuff like that, and it's just like cool. That was very quick. So,
yeah. But no,
um, go ahead.
I think that's most of the main
hmm
characters that we get at. There's some smaller things of
hmm
like the villains, like Leandrin,
Yeah.
which doesn't do too much for me other than just villain.
Yeah, basically
Okay,
just a plot device to get all the characters together on the west side of the world, pretty much. That's how I saw it.
ultimately. Then we get
Um,
we have Moraine, which we
mhm.
see her
We see
more
obviously way
manipulative.
less of her, but I think
Yeah.
kind of a cool, maybe I would say maybe world building, maybe a little bit a plot device for her, or moving the plot forward, where she's basically trying to track down the what is it, the Corinthian cycle, however you say that. Basically, the Dragon Reborn prophecy,
Hmm.
and really on kind of world building, like understanding what's really going on, or like what Rand as the Dragon Reborn is going to have to do. And we kind of see some of that start to pay off. Like the 5 go forward, but only 4 return. I mean, that was a varying line, but Moraine is trying to track down these things to really understand. Okay, if I'm going to direct the Dragon Reborn, I have to know these things and try to push them in that direction.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, we see less of her, but I think what we do see is still really good. It's still very
Yeah.
Moraine.
Yeah, what we get more Moraine manipulates things, knows more than most people, get the
Hmm.
relationship between her and the Armelin seat of
Yeah.
clearly one, it cements, I think, for us readers especially, she's on Rand's side. Like I
Right.
know it should be obvious, but like book one, you're still going, what is Moraine's angle here? Like you kind
Right.
of feel like Moraine would throw Rand under the bus
Hmm.
if necessity requires it.
Right.
Now in book two, you go, no, she's on the Dragon Reborn side. Not
Hmm.
necessarily Rand's, but she's
Yeah.
on the Dragon Reborn side. She's rooting for him.
Hmm.
She'll betray the White Tower
Right.
for
Well,
Rand
yeah, and I think
if
what
it's necessary.
right, and I think what helps that case too is that the Armelin seat is on her side as well, as we see.
Yeah.
So it's like even if she has to defeat or betray the White Tower, it's really she's just betraying her friend who would probably do the same thing if they were in like their spots were switched.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I agree. Moraine
Mhm.
is a real one.
We get a little bit of Lan as well, which I love the relationship between Lan
Hmm.
and Rand. We
Hmm.
don't get much of it, but we
No.
definitely get the two moments of one. You see, there's several months of training
Hmm.
between Land and Rand. Why Rand becomes a blade master as quickly as he does,
Hmm.
but then also Lan, in a small way, betraying not a full betrayal, but not doing what Moraine wants
Hmm.
deliberately for Rand's benefit
Right.
of a real good fatherly figure of going, no, Rand, you're about to see the Armelin seat.
Hmm.
You you need to stand proud. Like you
Hmm.
need I am going like, quick noble lesson for you. You're
Yeah.
not going to be I don't want you, Rand, to be just tugged around by the Armelin seat. You're gonna
Hmm.
be your own man.
Hmm. Well, and I think
And
too, it shows.
frustrates the others.
Yeah, and I think it shows how quick of a learner Rand is too. Because in that scene before where they're training and Lan is telling Rand that you're a very quick learner. I tell you, I show you how to do one form and you just know it. But it's like to actually see him like, okay, this is 5 minute conversation of you learning how to be a noble basically, and then him actually
Mhm.
going and doing it. They're like, that's a great show not tell moment. I think. Um,
Yeah. Well,
in
it also
character building.
gives if that so that is probably Rand's biggest ability is the void and the flame.
Hmm.
And basically him in that state learns perfectly. He
Hmm.
only has to see it once,
Yeah.
which one gives more credit to when after he fights the Blade Master.
Hmm.
He fought a Blade Master. He
Hmm.
now everything the Blade Master did, Rand also knows now. He's
Yeah.
learned it now.
Hmm.
And so it snowballs and why
Hmm.
he's as powerful as he becomes. But
Hmm. Which is cool too, because that Blade Master was Shan Chan. So even in that fight, Rand is like, "Wow, the forms are similar, but there are variances. Like it's a different style as well." So just him
mhm,
having those slightly different styles under his belt, like you said, I think is just really cool too. Like just being able to think about that and contextualize. Like if he was like a D&D character or like an RPG something, like just what would be on his stat sheet and what his abilities would be. Sometimes that's just how I think about characters. Just like
yeah,
when they have all these abilities, like being able to use Sedine, and he's a blade master, and also he's great at archery because he grew up in the Two Rivers, and that's basically he's an English longbowman, right?
yeah,
So, which I think, going off topic, that thing I think is a great like little not Easter egg, but like a nod to like cultural differences. Like later in the series, you see, or even in this book, I think it says that Rand made his own bow, and only him, Perrin, and Lan could draw it. Like no one else could draw it, just because I don't know if you know, but English longbowmen, like they knew,
Buff.
yeah. Well,
Oh, they
they developed those
strong
muscles since
boys.
children, like being children. Like you couldn't just be a bodybuilder and go and try to pull this bow because they don't have the right
Mhm,
muscles developed. Like they developed these over years and years and years of just drawing these massive bows. So just like little nods like that, especially later in the
mhm.
series, as I don't want to spoil
Yeah,
anything, but as the last battle comes closer, and just like there's different nods to
it
that.
comes out, yes.
Yeah.
The
So it's just like that very specific example. I just really love.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's from on a surface level, if you just go, "Oh, they also know how to use the bow," like, if you don't think
Hmm.
about it too much, it's like, "Oh, well, they're also good at this,"
Hmm.
but it's better that no, it makes sense why all the Two Rivers people
Hmm.
can do this because they've been
Right.
training since birth, where
Hmm.
versus the even the Borderlanders are using the half bows.
Right.
And why like, of course, why would they use a long bow for
Hmm.
there's not too much reason on why they would
Yeah,
do it.
and I think it's like Uno or maybe Minnesima, whatever the guy's name is. Even one of them, I think, make the comment. It's like, oh, you can't use that from horseback. Like, what's the point? So and it's like, and then there's a scene too where there's a couple that get off the horse and go like inspect a building, and then you can see it's like their bow-legged walk because it's like they're horsemen. They're on the horse more often than they're probably walking around. So it's just like their
Mhm.
little hobbles and like just Jordan's attention to detail for things like that. I just think is amazing. I just love it so much.
Completely agree.
So.
But yeah, move gives a good segue into plot. What
Mhm.
did you give the plot?
So plot, I had a little higher than Eye of the World, at a 9.1. So I did like
Okay.
it more, but obviously, like I was maybe a little gave Eye of the World maybe a little more than I should have.
A little
A
overzealous.
little overzealous. That's the word. Yeah.
I gave it a 7.5
Okay.
initially. I really love the plot of this book.
Hmm.
It comes together. I remember so many of the details as well.
Hmm.
So unlike with book 1 where I feel it's segmented and ultimately kind of just like rush comes
Hmm.
together, this book does a much better job of weaving everything together.
Yeah.
That I love it. I
Hmm.
love the initial aspect of Rand getting trapped and like trapped in the town,
Hmm.
the one power working against him. Then we have Pata and Fane captured, his escape with the horn and the dagger, and that's the biggest long
Hmm.
plot line. It's like, okay, go get the dagger
Right.
and the horn, and how that deviates. So it's always that is the plot point. Get the dagger and the horn,
Hmm.
but all the plot falls around it and how with Rand going into the mirror world, or
Right.
you have um try well, and then you have the girls doing their own thing.
Right.
They're not following that, but ultimately leads them to the same place.
Right.
Everything works together for a fantastic ending with
Hmm.
something that could have the horn could have been a Deus Ex Machina, but
Yeah.
it's been properly set up for 2 books
Right.
of how important it's supposed to be. They've
Hmm.
been chasing this thing, they've been talking about it.
Hmm.
So it coming into play makes so much more sense
Yeah.
rather than just go soldier, save the day.
Right. Yeah, I feel like it was probably outlined way better than Eye of the World was. Where
Mhm.
it's like they're in point A at the end of the book, they need to get to point B. Let's see what happens in between. Um, and again, I think it's great. And I think too, I like having the ways like explained and explored in book one, and then not just using that again in book two. They even try to at some point, but oh no, the black wind is right there. We gotta pivot. And then Rand is like, okay, well, where's a touchstone? Like I learned about this mirror world. Let's make that happen. So it's like not only is it driving the plot, but it's also building the world. Um, I just
We
think it's
get
great.
the whole world building of the flicker, flicker, flicker.
Yeah.
Just
And just hearing that on audio too, and not just being able to like glaze over it with my eyes, and just hearing the narrator say flicker like 30 times in my ears was like, oh my god. Oh my god. Like I think it made it more real for me.
oh, yeah, everyone living like dozens of dozens of possible lives and just like
Yeah.
coming out the other end of just traumatized of oh
Hmm.
my god,
Yeah.
I could have been this, I could have been a murderer, I could have been
Right.
amazing. Like Yeah,
And then you have someone
great.
like Perrin, where it's like there's some things that are just unescapable. Han Rand, he's just like he's got like a 1,000 mile stare off, and Rand's like, "Oh my god, you too." That's just so tough. It just made me feel for
There's no
Perrin even
escaping
more.
my fate.
Yeah.
What a good way to actually cement the problems that like someone like Perrin has. Of
Yeah.
you kind of go like, why is he so scared
Hmm.
of it? Like, because especially book one of going, come on, Perrin, like there's cool powers, but you don't have to. It's not
Right.
guaranteed that it's going to happen to you.
Hmm.
But then he goes through all these multiple lives and it keeps happening. It's like,
Yeah.
oh no.
Well, and especially knowing what happens in book three with that one character, I forget, I think Gnome, Noam, I think. I forget.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and like knowing what happens with him, but we haven't seen that yet. But Perrin probably has because he's probably experienced that in one of these lives too. I think just makes that scene a little more impactful as well.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think when we experience that flicker as Rand and him living all these different lives, like, oh, he's with Egwene, he had multiple kids and he loves them very much, but in the back of the head, he's like, I don't think this is how this should go. And then a flicker, and then oh, he's a soldier for Tyr now, and or he's a Queen's Guardman. And he's like, the back of the head, this isn't how things should go, and just kind of that Tavira nature in the pattern really weaving itself around him or weaving him into the pattern in a certain way. I think is just amazing plot armor. It's like literally like world
Oh
building
yeah.
plot armor. It's just amazing.
Robert Jordan worked in going like he worked in the best plot armor.
Yeah.
Plot armor is a part of the magic
Hmm.
system, and
It's awesome.
I love how that's a thing.
Yeah. Like it makes everything so believable. Like Rand could walk off a cliff,
Oh yeah,
a big draft of air could cushion his fall and he wouldn't die. And it's like, oh, he's a Taviran. Makes
of
sense.
course,
Yeah,
it's Devirin.
exactly. It just so everything's so believable. It's like so even when there are high stakes and things do negatively happen, like him almost dying or him whatever it is, and then just barely making it through, like it makes it much more believable. It's like, okay, the tavern made or not the tavern, the pattern made it that way, so he has to survive, or he has to survive in this way, or this person had to die and Rand live, or this person just because the pattern has to happen that way for things to move forward. So
And the thing is, the good aspect of it is it's never. I don't think we ever really get focused on. Oh, is Rand gonna make it?
yeah.
It's almost never that. That's
Hmm.
not the stakes. The
Right.
stakes are almost always how is Rand gonna suffer?
Yeah.
Like, is he gonna
Yeah.
lose someone that's not
Right.
important to the pattern? Like, is the pattern gonna kill off someone else to save his life?
Hmm.
And how much pain can he burden
Hmm.
until he breaks?
Yeah.
It's never about will he live. It's
Hmm.
about how much pain is he gonna go through?
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. I've never thought about it like that. But especially after you saying that, it makes me think later in the series when he has this list that he recites as he's falling asleep every day. It's like, and as that list grows longer and longer, it's like, damn, Rand, that's. I understand how you become Darth Rand, which I'm sure we'll talk
Yeah.
about in a few books. But
Oh yeah.
yeah.
We'll get there.
So, but yeah, no, just it's plot armor, but it's believable. So I can't hate it.
Yeah.
You know?
It also makes it fun.
Yeah.
I people may disagree, but I find it fun how the pattern can when you lean into it of
Hmm.
with say the beginning where Rand is trying to get out.
Hmm.
He's trying to leave and to get away from especially the Amerlin seats coming. Leave before that happens. And he keeps staying here. And he
Yeah.
tries to leave and then something distracts him.
Yeah.
And he's caught attention and but he's constantly held back and it's the
Hmm.
pattern just making sure he stays in one place because it's vital that he's there.
Hmm.
And it's fun seeing it. And especially when it becomes more overt of characters really trying to get away and just
Hmm.
going, wait, they have that moment of when you walk into a room and go, wait, why was I here? Why did I come into this room?
Hmm.
And that happens every time for characters of going,
Hmm.
all right, I'm getting out of this. I don't want to be a part of this
Yeah.
anymore. They leave and go somehow find their way back.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this other character comes around and oh, she's cute. I'm
Hmm.
gonna go,
Right.
yeah.
That even happens in this book too. After Ingtar sacrifices himself, and then Matt, Perrin, and Rand, or I forget the three, Heron too, or Hearn, the four of them,
Yeah.
after they escape, and then they're in this little copse or little tiny forest outside of follow him. And then Rand's like, wait, this doesn't feel right. Like Egwene's in there. I feel this. Like this isn't right. We have to go back and save Egwene. Like we have to. And like just because it's like a great character moment too, where he's just self-sacrificing. But also it's more than that, where it's like something inside of him is like you have to go back. It's where again I
Yeah.
think it's that pattern's like you got to go back, Rand.
But basically, the world is willing certain plot moments
Hmm.
into motion, but also the it's not so bad that you think, oh, the plot wills so like everyone's safe and everything's gonna go fine.
Hmm.
No, it's more the board will be arranged a certain way
Hmm.
and only a key few people are necessary. You keep pushing,
Hmm.
some other characters are gonna fall off the board.
Yeah.
And so that's the stressful moment of Egwene is not necessary for
Hmm.
the board.
Right.
And so she's almost always at risk. She's not Taviran.
Hmm.
And so she's almost like, oh, you're scared for her.
Hmm.
And that's why I like it.
Hmm. That's cool. What about Loyal? I know we're not talking about characters. I know we're on the
Oh, I
plot,
know.
but I feel like Loyal. He's such a good boy character. He's just always there at the right moments. It's like, but he always gets glazed over. I feel.
True. Okay, he has his even better moments
Hmm.
later on in the series,
Yes.
but in this book as well, of course you enjoy Loyal. Like
Hmm.
Loyal is just
He's such a
yeah,
good boy.
he's such a good boy. He's the only everyone else has some serious character flaws.
Hmm.
Loyal doesn't have too many real flaws. Like,
Right.
what would be his flaw? Being too timid, maybe
Yeah.
somewhat.
Yeah. It's like one of those like interview questions where it's like, oh, what's one of your weakness? It's like, oh, I care too much. Where it's like not really a weakness.
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, Loyal is self-sacrificing to a
Yeah.
fault. He's willing to
Hmm.
fight for his friends. Like, he's
Yeah.
not lacking in courage.
Yeah.
But for smaller things of like standing up to his mom, he's a little
Right.
scared.
Right.
So it's not a real big flaw.
Hmm.
It's just you you like I like seeing him react to conflict between characters of like
Hmm.
when Rand and Matt and Perrin are fighting. He's like, "Oh, guys, no!"
Right.
Like when it's like a child when they see their parents fighting. It's like, "Oh no,
Right.
I feel." Yeah,
Yeah. And then he's just kind of caught in the middle of it, and he's like, "Please don't do that." That's tough. Well, and then too, he's kind of a great character for like exposition dumps or like world building dumps, where it's
mm,
like doesn't happen all that often, but usually it's like a direct question where it's like, "Oh, Loyal, you're a builder. What do you know about this?" And then he's like, "Well, and then it's like three paragraphs. It's like, all right, like some people don't love it exposition dumps, which I understand, but I don't feel like Jordan does too many of those. But when he does, it's like kind of perfectly laid out where it's like, all right, we understand things have to be laid out. It's like, and if it's coming from Loyal's mouth, it's understandable. It's all right. He's
yeah.
long winded. That's just a character trait.
Again, Robert Jordan setting himself up for success.
Hmm.
Of when he needs to give an exposition dump, he made a character that is long-winded and
Hmm.
talks too much. Other
Yeah.
characters are like, you talk too much,
Yeah.
Loyal. And so it's
Right.
understandable when Loyal kind of goes off on a
Yeah.
tangent and starts explaining things, and everyone
Right.
in the story is like, we get it, Loyal,
Right.
please
Yeah.
summarize.
Even like Varen in like the other Brown Aja, where it's like Moraine and the Armelin seat are like asking her direct questions where it's like, well, what do you think about this? And then she like goes off on a tangent and they're looking at her like, come on, get back to it. Where it's like, that's just a character trait. But then later when more things get explained from their mouth and it's multiple pages, it's like, again, Robert Jordan set himself up for success where it's like, okay, she's Brown Aja, she's like a professor at school, like she's going to be very long winded, but what she's saying is very insightful. So that's very
Yeah.
important. So,
Like it's great. You just make
mhm.
you make the necessary parts a character trait rather than just
Yeah.
they start. That's where exposition dumps can kind of feel wrong is when a
Hmm.
character shouldn't be saying these things.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately the biggest problem with exposition dumps is going
Hmm.
that character in normal circumstances wouldn't say this.
Yeah.
But Loyal and Baron, they
Hmm.
would say that. Like
Right.
you completely believe them going off on a tangent explaining this big story
Hmm.
of the history of the world and all.
Yeah. It's not like, I don't know, like, I don't have a great example, so I'm not trying to single anybody out. But if it's like a big fantasy series where it's like they have its own calendar system and the days of the week, there's really like 12 days in a week, and there's three like, and then there's a character just sitting here explaining that to a man who's lived there his whole life. He's like, yeah, okay, great. So it's like
Yeah.
an example like that. I agree where it's like that doesn't make sense.
Versus Loyal could
Hmm.
take a look and going, "Oh, did you know how this calendar came to be?
Yeah,
Its history is fascinating."
yeah,
And everyone's like,
exactly.
We get it. We know how the
Right,
calendar works."
right, yeah.
And Loyal would be explaining the history of it and why it fascinates him.
Hmm. That's why
So
I think, in my opinion, to go on a tangent myself, why tropes like the farm boy work so well, whether he's chosen one or not, where it's like he's just kind of in his own little world. Maybe he's ignorant, maybe he's not unlearned, but just not as advanced as some other people who live in a big city. Like that's why I think it works so well in like Rand in the other boys knowing very little, and then they get exposed to these little things. And for a reader, that works great because, again, like I said in the first video for the first book, we know very little about the world aside from what is in their minds and their heads. So yeah, I just that's why I love that trope. Where I know Austin hates that trope, but it's probably one of my favorites.
it also just makes things pretty simple. Where
Hmm.
I'll I'll compare it to this is currently so I read the first book of Malazan,
Hmm.
and I'm trying to read the second book.
Okay.
And that book has no hand holding, no farm boys
Okay.
in Malazan. Oh god, it's hard.
Oh no.
It's so hard to read.
I've
Like
I've heard
there's so many.
I've heard basically just that where it's like if you can get through it, it's amazing. I've heard on a reread similar to
Yes.
Wheel of Time, it's even better. But on the first time through, it's kind of a grind. But I haven't done it yet. I don't even own a book yet, so kind of
It
afraid to.
it's one of those things of it's not something you can listen to in the background on
Hmm.
your first read. Or else like yeah, you could listen to it and maybe you'll get something out of it, but you won't enjoy it
Right.
because you won't understand what's going it just stuff happens and then you
Hmm.
go, "Okay, why should I care?"
Hmm.
Unless you pay attention and like okay, I don't understand like you're going to understand very little, but if you pay attention you may understand a little bit more.
Hmm.
I almost have to read every chapter twice.
Dang,
But
that's tough.
where it's nice, the nice farm boy, everything's explained to the farm
Hmm.
boy because he knows nothing, and
Hmm.
like I know nothing.
Right.
It
That's probably
works.
why it works so well for me, just because I'm ignorant about a lot of things. So why can't my character I'm reading be ignorant?
It's a simple trope, and it works well as long as you give the farm boy a bit more than him
That's
just
true.
being the farm boy and
Right.
good at everything.
Yeah.
If you give him burden of being the chosen one,
Hmm.
if you give him the stubbornness
Hmm.
aspect of like his culture, yes,
Yeah.
that's why Rand is great.
Exactly. And he's
He's not
not bland
bland
Rand.
Rand. He's not bland Rand.
Not bland Rand.
Well, book 1 maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit.
Book 2?
Book two.
No.
Great.
I'm all on I'm on the Rand train on book 2. I
Hmm.
loved Rand in book 2.
Make Rand great again.
Make Rand great again.
Anyway, moving on with dialogue and prose. I just had it the same as 9.5, kind of like I've sort of talked about throughout the video already. I just love Robert Jordan's writing. I know some
Mhm.
people think he long-winded. I know especially like my dad, for example. I got him to read The Wheel of Time. I gifted him the first 3 books, the box set, for Christmas this last year, and he blazed through it. He's someone I've been trying to convince to get on the channel with me to talk about Wheel of Time, but he just
Oh
refuses
yeah.
to. um, but anyway, he told me after the end of the series that there were sections where if there's a long like just describing things, he would just skip it. Be like that's part like he is a very quick reader, but I feel like that's part of the reason he got through it even a little quicker than I expected him to.
Mm.
Is just because there's big long explanations of he's a horseman and he has these tassels on his helmet and he just would skip some stuff. He's just like going to the next dialogue thing. I don't care. So him is a prime example of like think people like some people think Robert Jordan's a little long-winded. I think every word's necessary. Yes, he could probably shave some stuff down, but if I'm in the character's head and this is what the character's thinking and this is what people are saying to this character, I think everything's necessary and I appreciate every single word on the page.
I definitely appreciate it, but also Robert Jordan does not. I think they can even be joyed by people like your dad.
Mhm.
Of he repeats things in different ways so
Mhm.
that if you miss it the first time, you'll pick it up eventually. Like
Yeah.
that's the wonderful thing is by the end of the series, you get it. I think anyone that finishes
Mhm.
understands the Wheel of Time. Maybe they
Right.
missed a couple Easter eggs,
Yeah.
but clues are not. There's not just one clue,
Mhm.
and then later it's revealed. It's clue one, clue two. Like it's layered. So
Mhm.
if you skip one, you didn't pay attention to one of them. Maybe you didn't pay attention to two.
Mhm.
You'll eventually find out.
Yeah.
It's well done that way. Of even if you didn't get it the first time, you'll eventually pick it up.
Mhm.
That's a hard line to draw because I'm even remembering something like and I don't mean to like pick on it, but this is the most recent example I can think of
Yeah.
is Mark Lawrence's library. What is
Oh, the book
uh
that shouldn't burn?
the book that wouldn't burn? There we go.
Mhm.
There. Yep. There
There
we
you
go.
go.
That
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, there you go.
The book that wouldn't burn. It had a couple segments where it repeated something,
Mhm.
like where a character said a thing again,
Mhm.
like almost paragraphs later, and it's got annoying. Of like,
Yeah.
why are you repeating this? I get it. I
Right.
understand. Move on.
Yeah.
Robert Jordan also repeats things, but he does it in a way that's hidden, where I never
Mhm.
feel like I'm being browbeaten.
Right. Sometimes even the way Jordan, I think I mentioned this last time too, but even the way Jordan describes somebody or something, he might do it in or three different ways. So it's like if you're not paying attention, you might lose track of who's who. But also it's not like Malaz and hard where it's like you got to pay attention to every single word or else you don't know who's saying what. Like it's not to that level. Um, but if sometimes if you're like really not paying attention, like my dad, you might skip a few lines, then you might lose track. But I want to pick on Brandon Sanderson here for a second, just as a complete
Mhm.
180. Is that I think
Go
some
ahead.
people like again I haven't read Stormlight yet. I need to, and I've
Got it.
heard some complaints, like some of the very minor complaints about Stormlight, is that people like the interludes. They're like, why am I like? I was just talking, like we were just reading about this character, and now we're completely part of the world, completely irrelevant characters, and then we go back. It's like kind of jarring for a lot of people, where this doesn't have that. It doesn't have interludes, distraction. If there's a cutaway to something else, like a prologue, for example, for who calls
Yeah.
himself Bors, it's relevant later. So
Also,
I
Vale
haven't read it,
Doman.
so I'm not sure. But
Vale Doman chapters, which some of my favorite chapters,
yes,
period.
hmm
We didn't even talk about Vale Doman, but I guess it's not much of a character discussion when
yeah,
it's just for world building.
hmm
Vale Doman's one of my favorite chapters to follow.
hmm
But it is like an interlude, but it's woven into the story a little better.
right. Like when he gets hunted down. Just talking about him, gets hunted down on the ship by the Shanshan, and then we see that they have the Damani. He thinks, oh, it's Aes Sedai fighting for them, but really it's not. We understand that. And then he gets pulled in, and then next time we see him, he's talking to High Lord Tyrick or whatever his name is, the Blade Master. And then they find he's got the disc of the ancient Aes
The
Sedai
seal.
symbol. Yeah, and then at the very end, like we sort of, if you're paying attention to book one, it's one of the seals. But at the end, when Moraine is like opens the bag, those are all the shards. Those are two of the seals that are broken. And like when when the Blade Master takes the one and puts it next to the other one, that's just like oh shit moment. And then it's another oh shit moment at the end when again Moraine is showing Bran the broken shards of the two seals that are broken now. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I agree. Bail Domain's great.
Yeah, no, it, he's the most removed from a lot of the plot elements. He's the most out of the loop.
hmm
He's still a part of a bunch of different plot points. He's always around,
hmm
but because he's not one of our main characters, he always gets the facts wrong.
hmm
Like in the first book where he's like, "Oh, the Trollocs are after me."
Right.
No, they're after Rand, but
Yeah.
he
Right.
thinks he's being chased. Thinks that's the Aes Sedai fighting for the Shah.
hmm
All these different things he gets wrong, but it's a great example of how he is your avenue to seeing how everyone is getting things wrong and
hmm
why is the world not coming together to fight the Dark One.
Right.
Bale Doman's a great example.
Right.
No one knows what's going on. Like, they know bad things are happening, but they don't
Mhm.
know whose side is fighting who,
Right.
and what is the good side? Who knows?
Yeah. Again, kind of back to that example I was talking about. It's all those rumors from the eyes and ears of the Aes Sedai coming out of the
Yeah.
White Tower. It's like you really got to sift through all this garbage to figure out what is kind of the denominator that's all the same. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of false dragons out running around the world. It's like this is the most we've had in generations, and just as an example, things like that. But I agree,
Mhm.
Bale is kind of that show don't tell of those rumors. I would say where he's living through those rumors. Um, or perpetuating those rumors himself.
Yeah, it's why I love him as a character, and
Mhm.
mainly, well, I like his character quite a bit, and he's funny, and
Mhm.
just he has his own charm to him, but
Yeah.
he's great for world building,
Mhm. And especially too, because
which
he's, I
yeah.
think, like the first Illianer we meet too. So even outside of just what he experiences, just the way he talks is kind of funny. Where it's
Mhm.
like, is it because he's just a sailor who talks funny because he's a sailor pirate guy, or because he's from Ilion and they kind of have different patterns of speech? And then that's kind of even highlighted when he's talking to not Surok, but the
The
one
Shan
captain.
Chan woman.
Yeah, the Shan Chan woman that was interesting. I didn't realize that was how they met, but
Yep.
now I do now, which is really fun.
It
Um,
comes up later in book 3.
yeah. But when like they're talking to each other, even in his mind, she like when she's talking, he's like, she talks so funny. Like I don't, and then she even says, "You talk funny." Like slow down. And she's like, he tries to like over pronunciate things so she understands that he's not trying to do anything bad, and it just was really funny.
Yeah. No, that's one of the best aspects of the whole book of you understand it's layers, it's circles of truth.
Hmm.
At the very center, you kinda get, you know, the Rand and Moraine are kind of at the center of it.
Hmm.
Of like, they know the most of what's going on, even though they don't know everything, of course,
Right.
but they're the closest to the prophecies and what actually is going to happen. Like, for the most part, they know who's on the good side and who's on the bad side, and they
Hmm.
kind of know. And further out from that where, Matt barely knows anything that's going on, but he
Right.
knows some.
Yeah.
The girls also, they're all, Egwene keeps going like, "What the hell's Rand doing?" And,
Right.
they don't know, but they know a bit more than other people. They know
Hmm.
the actual sides that are fighting, and you just bring it out further and further, and you have
Hmm.
on the outer edge is Bail Doman.
Yeah.
He's a part of everything, and
Right.
he's just getting most things wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think it works great too, is because he is a sailor and he can just kind of like bounce around different parts, like whether it's on the
Mhm.
ocean coast or he goes up one of the rivers or whatever. He can kind of get around the world pretty quickly. So just kind of popping into his perspective, I think can work where it's like he was over towards not Tarvalon, but sort of over there. I think I forget exactly where we first meet him, but now he's over on like the top west, basically the Seattle of Randland.
Seattle of
Or
Rand.
Washington. Yeah, that's how I conceptualize it in my head.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
yeah.
it's actually, I can just look at the map.
Here I could.
'Cause
Well,
I remember they meet basically in,
I have it over
um
my head,
they
but it's
meet
only like
right,
half of it.
is it they meet in White Bridge. So you first see him in book 1 at
That's
White
right.
Bridge.
Maybe that's why I was thinking Tarvalon because White Tower, whatever. But yeah, White Bridge.
Then you eventually see Ardamon, I believe, is then when you
Hmm.
see him doing all that stuff, but he came from Tarvalon, and then yeah.
So,
But
and I think that's why he can be that kind of outside layer of truth character because he can just kind of bounce around the different areas of the world, which I think works really
mhm,
well.
which kind of leads really well into world building.
Hmm.
Probably one of the more significant aspects. I think, though, my original score for this was a 7 out of 10. I would like to raise
Oof.
that up to like an 8.25
That's
personally.
still not high enough, Richard. Mine is a 9.4. Still not high
Hey,
enough.
I gotta leave room to
I
grow
know, I
because
know.
book 4 knocks everything out of the park,
That's true.
but book 2 does a great job,
Yeah. Well,
like,
especially from book
especially
1.
compared to book 1.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I rated them the same, but again, it's probably because I was maybe a little overzealous rating the first book. But I think it's just
I think
because
I
as a
can
first book, I think it does so much so well with not
mhm,
kind of exposition dumping like we were talking about before. It kind of makes it feel like a real well lived in world. And yeah, Great Hunt just adds to that, especially with like the Shan Chan coming in, because we sort of heard rumors from book one, like, oh, Arthur's Hawkwing's armies are coming back. Like, oh, that's just rumors. That's on the West Coast. Like, we're way over here on the east or the central part of the Randland. Um, yeah, so I just think it's great.
Yeah, no, the Shan Chan are a great addition. One of how different they are,
Mm-hmm.
of completely different culture,
Mm-hmm.
completely antagonistic to everyone's way of life
Mm-hmm.
with dealing with channelers.
Right.
You have the you get more of the White Tower and their politics.
Mm-hmm.
You get more of the world building of the magic system of a world where um where the Trolloc Wars, they lost the Trolloc Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a deeper history of like, oh no, they came close to losing the world already. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Dark One wins in almost every timeline for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah.
Not a one and done, but
Mm-hmm.
you get so much more
Mm-hmm.
from the different cultures of the how what do they call it?
It's not the Game of Thrones. It's the Game of
It's not
Houses.
the Game of
Is
Houses.
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's like Aris Daman, or I forget how they say it in
I think it
the old
yeah, Ars
tongue.
Damana, something like
Yeah,
that.
something
But
like that.
where that is a aspect of their culture, but it also is a part of other cultures. That's a bit of overlap
Hmm.
of the idea of the game of
Hmm.
houses, which is
Oh,
just
for an Andrew, I didn't realize you
oh,
played the game so well. Yeah.
I love that of just him burning the envelopes, going like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Get out, like I'm not playing. And everyone like, oh,
Yeah.
he's playing so well. Like,
Yeah.
God damn it.
Later that night, he's got 10 more to burn.
It's like, ah, no.
Yeah.
they won't they won't leave me alone.
Right. No, that is a great aspect, and we kind of see a little bit more of the fear of the Aiel from like the Aiel War, and like more people just seeing Rand and like doing his double take. We're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize some of you dress so well. Like,
Yeah.
that's just blatant racism for one, but also like if you're paying attention, like Rand kind of glazes over
Also,
it, but if you're paying attention, it's like other people realize or see him as an Aielman.
racist, but in this context, not inaccurate. Because I
Right.
don't think I've ever not one
Right.
Aielman other than Rand
Yeah.
dresses like a noble. They're all
Yeah. No, you're right.
ninjas.
Well,
All of them.
except I forget her name, except that like one evil um Aiel lady that what's her name? That's like wants like is a
Oh,
wise one but can't
later.
but isn't a wise one really.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
forget
yeah,
what
yeah.
her name is, but
Later
she's like
on.
all decked out in like way more than she should be. I would argue she's the other one.
Fair enough. The two
Yeah.
examples.
But yeah, you're right. Everyone like they're just all in like basically nothing, basically loincloth, and that's it.
Well, they're wearing their robes and like have their head scarf
True.
coverings and
True. No, I in my
yeah,
head it's op. Yeah, I'm dumb because you're right.
they're just
They're from yeah,
walking in the
yeah.
no.
Because that's how
I
I feel like
love
that's how a lot of
I love
the Western world sees them. So maybe that's just like their racism has built that in my head, and then when we actually meet the idea, like I don't know, man. Like I'm not a true fan, I guess.
not a true fan.
Yeah.
No, but the Aiel are great, and especially where I've read other books where the world building is set up in a sense of this book is this stuff. We're
Hmm.
going over this culture in this book, and
Hmm.
then this book it's all in self-contained ones of this book. We're setting up progress payoff of this book.
Hmm.
Wheel of Time never does that. It's always a little bit more.
Hmm.
Where we got a bit of the Aiel stuff in book one, and we get a little bit more of them in book two, but not
Hmm.
too much.
Hmm.
It just on every little aspect it builds.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a consistent build rather
Hmm.
than a self-contained stuff. Like it's not like book two is the Aiel book
Right.
or the Ilianer book.
Hmm.
It's just a continuation
Yeah. I mean,
of
if you had to argue
everything else.
that, it would be like the Carhine book, or however you say that. But going back to the Aiel, there's even that one Aiel man that, like the runner, he's like, "Oh, I'm looking for the one who comes before the dawn," and he's talking to Varen. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, wise one. I didn't realize And she's like, wise one, what do you mean? And like, he's like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have said that. And like her getting out little bits and like her, like, and then of course she's a Brown. She's always thinking. She's like, okay, what does this mean? Does that mean there's channelers as well? Like, like so like
Yep.
gears are turning and like dropping these little seeds. I think that's what, in my opinion, makes or partly makes the Aiel history so rich when we finally get to really dive deep into it. Is because there's so much mysticism around the Aiel, especially with the Aiel War, with them coming over um, the mountains and messing up Karhine and the rest of Randland people who can't, so kind of that mysticism. And then it's like a lot of that mysticism is broken, but also not, just because there's such different culture and so out there compared to Western culture, you could say.
Yeah.
So
It
makes me
West.
excited for book 3, book 4.
Oh yeah, and I love book 3 in the sense of we'll talk about it when after in our review of it. But I love the structure
Mm-hmm.
of that book more,
Mm-hmm.
especially it. There's some aspects there. It also has one of my favorite scenes of the entire series in
Okay.
it, which I bet it's one of your favorite scenes as well.
I'm sure we will
You'll
figure that out.
remember it when you get
I'll
to
remember it. Okay.
it.
That's cool. Yeah.
But yeah, other than that,
Mm-hmm.
this is a fantastic book for me.
Mm-hmm.
In all honesty, I know I told Austin that, oh, give it till book 4.
Mm-hmm.
But in all, I should have known if he
After
didn't
book 2.
really like, if he didn't at least like book 2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I think a
like
lot of
I
his
understand the
complaints.
dislike with book 1.
Mm-hmm.
Book 2 is just so much better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a lot of, from what I remember, it's been a while since I watched that, uh, your guys' review for book 2, but I remember one of Austin's complaints was that he was still kind of holding on to all the Tolkien derivative um,
Hmm.
similarities, like Patton Fane. He played, I feel like, a bigger role in this book than he did in book 1, and he's like that Gollum character. And like, and so
But
Austin just kept pointing to that. He's like, oh, Patton Fane's Gollum, Patton Fane's Gollum, and the Blaine's
even then,
rant. So it's like, come on, Austin, come on.
by book 2, he's not really Gollum.
Not really.
I,
He's
I
he's
mean,
got he's actually
he's got his
scarier
own
than
thing.
Golem. And especially with book 2, I didn't realize how powerful he was in book 2. I kind of forgot because we sort of see him, but
Yeah.
then we go away for a lot of other characters. And so it's like for this throughout the series, I feel like his power fluctuates quite a bit, but I forget how powerful
Mhm.
he is in book 2. Like literally, like
Oh, pinning the
nailing,
Murdral to the
nailing them.
wall.
Yeah, exactly. That I completely forgot about that scene when that was going on, and the sniffer was like, "Oh, there's something worse than a Murdral." I'm like, "Oh my god, what's worse?" And then I'm like, "Oh yeah, Patton Fane. That's right. He's got the dagger. He's a messed up character, dude. He's a messed up dude."
Yeah, no, that whole review it reminded me of, yeah, there's a bunch of Tolkien allegories, things like
Mhm.
that, but
I mean,
I
we're
don't know.
after book 1. I feel like it's completely different. Like, yes, you can have direct linkages from book 1, like Moraine's the Gandalf character, Elaine's like the or Aragorn. You can argue that, and I agree, but they're completely different characters by book 2.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then there's the aspect of, I know he didn't like how we had the same thing again of the characters are
Hmm.
together, they break up, and they come back together again at the end, where Rand fights,
Hmm.
another
With
battle in the
Pelasmon,
sky.
yeah,
So to some degree, I get it
yeah,
there. I like this one a lot better, but
hmm,
I understand how that can kind of be frustrating. Of that's the exact same plot pattern.
yeah. That's
I
fair.
mean, I understand. It just doesn't bother me,
True.
especially
Doesn't
since
bother
this
me
one was
either.
handled way better.
Yeah, I will agree though. Like at like the first time reading it, and okay, Rand fought Belazamon in book 1, he won, and then he's back in book 2. That I'm like, okay, sort of whatever. But I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the way I interpreted it is that later in the series we find this out. So minor spoilers, I guess. But like the Dark Lord, or not Dark Lord, excuse me, going back talking about Tolkien. But the Dark One has like his domain is over the dead, basically, right? So him being able to bring back his Forsaken, but maybe it's a different body. That's how I interpret it, at least on the second read through. Although you can argue it's not because he's still got the burns from his battle in book 1. So, but I just interpret it as that it's still that Forsaken, it's just a different body.
Yeah, and then thing is, it happens again in book 3.
Yeah.
Similar plot structure, just going,
Yeah.
another kinda big battle is with the same.
Mhm.
It's like, "Okay, come on."
Yeah.
I understand. I understand the frustration of, like, this is the thing that he's literally fighting the same guy and wins
Mhm.
all 3 books.
Yeah.
That's weird.
True.
I understand that being a complaint. That makes sense to me, but
Mhm.
other than that, I loved it.
Yeah, I agree. So, cool. Any closing thoughts you wanna wrap up with here, Richard?
Ah, I just think this is a from here on, this the Great Hunt sets up a great start of fantastic world building. The world building gets better from here on out.
Mhm.
The action is a lot more enjoyable. The plot is well woven together.
Mhm.
The characters are now finally who they are.
Right.
Sets up for some amazing scenes where at the end, like the fact that the end of book 2 is so bombastic of all the thing like huge battles and all, and that this is
Mhm.
small potatoes
Mhm.
for what's to come.
Right.
That we got some moments coming up. Like book 5 is one of the most action heavy books of this whole series.
Mhm.
Amazing stuff
I know. I
coming
think
over.
I can't remember because it's been a couple years since I started the series, or maybe it's only been a year. I don't remember. But after reading like book 3, 4, 5, like I was on such a high that I think I only read Wheel of Time for a good while, and then it was like, and then I had to put the brakes on once I got to the slog, which in my opinion isn't really slog, which we
I
talked
agree.
about. But like once I got to that, it wasn't. I slowed down a little bit and like was reading other things, not because I was in the slog, but just because I didn't want it to end. Like I'm like, oh, this is so amazing, this is so amazing, and like and then I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm like, I don't know if I want to see that light yet. I want to stretch this out. I want to make it last. Um, so yeah, I remember after book 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, super hyped to
Yeah,
keep going.
I got a similar feeling with Discworld.
Hmm.
I've deliberately haven't binged all of the books.
Hmm.
I like having some Discworld to still read.
How many? It was like 46 or so.
41 or
41.
42.
How many have you read?
I
If you had to guess, like
think
half,
it's
over half.
no, only like 12.
Oh,
I've kept I've
gotcha,
reserved myself of
gotcha.
I I also was reading out of order, and then
Hmm.
I started like, I love this too much. I'm going to read chronologically.
Yeah, that's smart.
So
Cool.
yeah,
Well,
but no,
something
what a wonderful talk.
something I'm excited about, just as a last
Hmm,
thought, is just I don't know, like the first two, like we said, are great, but just knowing it gets better, and then just kind of like you hinted at, but just the plot structure of book 3 is so different from everything else
yeah,
that I'm just excited to relive that, and maybe focus on some other characters, not new characters, but just more time with characters that we already love and enjoy, um, and just more of that Taviran plot armor wreaking havoc and just kind of picking up the pieces that are left behind, So, and
oh yeah,
then I guess a question for you, last question is: I know you said for originally when we started this, you said you already read first 4 books on the reread, doing it with Austin. Are you gonna reread the third book a third time, or are you just gonna kind of go from memory? Because I know it's been a little bit of
I
time
think
now since it's taken me so
I
long
think
to
I
get to book
will.
3.
I think I will because I
Yeah.
love book 3
Hmm.
and I love book 4.
Okay.
I think I'll read them again.
Nice.
just cuz it, and that way I'll be really thing is I actually remembered book 2 quite well, and
Hmm.
I listened to some summaries as well and like picked it up.
Hmm.
I think I remember this book really well,
Hmm.
but I also want to reread book 3
Yeah.
and 4 again.
Yeah.
So I'll fresh going into book 5. It won't be just a weird
Right.
drop.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, especially with tonal, especially if you're going things from Malazan to book 5 of Wheel of Time. And now, like I know you guys have been big on the dungeon crawler Carl and things like that lately. So yeah, I just was curious because I know obviously you got your own channel you're doing, you got your own Patreon that you guys should subscribe to, that like
Oh yeah.
your book club that you're doing. Like, so I know you got a lot of other book commitments already. So I just was curious, like, because obviously these aren't tiny books, So, but
Yeah, but
also
also book
but I
3
know
is
you love the
not
series
that
too,
big.
so
Yeah, also book 3 is not that big. So
that's fair.
I'll add it in.
That's
I
fair.
have a good I have a good car ride going up, so I think I'll be able to get a lot of my TBR for the month done
Nice.
in this road trip
There you
that
go.
I'm doing this weekend. So
Nice.
it will be pretty good.
Yeah, sweet. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you, Richard. I won't take too much more of your
Of
time. I know
course.
you're excited to go see Deadpool. So,
Yeah, right after this, going out with some friends,
nice.
see that movie.
Yeah. So, all right. I appreciate you guys for watching. Like I said, if you like this video, please hit like down below. Want to see more from me, Diggerdan? Please hit that subscribe button down below. And you guys should go reach or not reach out. Go look at 2toRamble. They're great guys. They just hit 30,000 subs. So try to get that a little higher for them. And like I said, they do have a Patreon as well. So if you want to have a monthly book club, they got that going on every month. So yeah, you should go sub to that as well.
Appreciate the plug, but also, yeah, got a sub to Digger Dan here, giving some great Wheel of Time reviews
Yeah, that's all I've
and
been doing
other
lately, just because life
gonna
has been crazy. So, but like I said, I'm
yeah.
committing the entire series with Richard. So it might take me a
Oh
while,
yeah.
but we'll get through the whole series. So,
All right.
all right.
Bye everyone.
Yep. Bye, guys.